Now, what I used to be very annoyed by a distant relative of mine, she was much older than me then, who used to punctuate her every sentence with, "Do you understand? Naiintindihan mo ba ako?" Paulit-ulit siya. I was annoyed every time she would ask me that because I thought she was kinda overdoing it. For every little detail, she would ask whether I understood. More often than not, she would be referring to details about things she would plan and do for the benefit of others, especially her pamangkins, nephews and nieces. Being unmarried, all she thought of was how to help as many people as possible, most especially her relatives. That included me, by the way. Every time I would visit her in Canada, she would invariably have a lot of padalas, habilins, pabaons, pasalubongs. I would go away from her place not only with boxes of goodies, but also an even bigger number of instructions, reminders, and more reminders. Of course, I would listen to each and every one half-heartedly. My little annoyance would lead me to some kind of tuning out for sheer survival of the ordeal. And upon reaching home, I would open the boxes of pasalubongs and, lo and behold, every item would be painstakingly marked and pasted with tons of post-its, each one labeled with more instructions and reminders. Funny, but on hindsight, I feel it all made sense. Had they not been marked and labeled, I would not have known what to do with all of them. The mind forgets all too easily. Or if it does not forget, it simply does not understand. Period. An old Latin proverb, I think from the scholastics, tells us, "Repetitio mater studiorum." Repetition is the mother of all learning. Just look back at your own experience. What do you remember most? Isn't it the one that your mother or father drilled into you over the years? Some psychologists coined a word for it, although it has a negative connotation: parental tapes. These are the statements that we heard over and over again, statements that have become us, that have shaped who we are right now. The Lord, gospel commentators say, was a good teacher. We need not have a teacher's advanced degrees to understand this. Today, we hear Him ask us, "Do you understand all these things? Naiintindihan niyo ba ang lahat ng ito?" Like us, the disciples were quick to answer, "Yes." Exactly like us who think and act like we already knew everything at times. Exactly like us who at times cannot stand it being told, reminded, or instructed. But often, we really do not understand things fully. We see only parts and parcels of the truth, not the whole truth. Our minds really do not fully grasp everything. We are all short-sighted in a very real sense. Every scribe, we are told, who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household, who brings from his storeroom both the new and the old. Among others, it refers to the ability to integrate a whole lot of things, the capacity to look at wholes and not get lost in disparate parts. It means being able to see the totality, to see as God sees, to think as God thinks, to understand the mysterious ways of God. Now, this is the difficult part. How does one fully understand the reasons why suffering exists in the world? How does one fathom, let alone accept, the mysterious and difficult ways of God, who thinks not as man thinks, whose ways are not man's ways? How on earth does one explain convincingly to one who is grieving the sudden loss of a beloved one, deep in the throes of the pain of unexpected loss of a beloved one, deep in the throes of the pain that all is well because it is all in accordance with God's plan? It's a little bit hard to understand. When my mother died also suddenly many years ago at age 63, I did not understand a thing. I had lots of questions deep within. My mind knew all the answers, or so I thought. It knew that it was all part of God's plan, that it was God's will. But my heart revolted against what my mind told me. It simply did not make sense to one who was still grappling with the sense of utter loss, as painful as it was unexpected. Hindi ko maintindihan ang lahat. Of course, at that time, I did not know that what was missing was integration. The event of a sudden loss of a loved one was too close in time for me to make sense of it all. It was too soon for me to situate it within the totality of my life and that of our whole family. Being too close to the event, and a painful one at that, my whole system was shut off to really understanding anything. I knew in my mind, but at heart, I did not understand. Now, older and wiser, there is something I know I can share with deep personal conviction, the truth of what St. Paul speaks about. We know that all things work for the good of those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. Indeed, how very true this is. On hindsight, my mom's death, which was hard to accept then, is now really an enviable one. She died so peacefully. Doctors say that her death was the most peaceful death one could imagine, even from the medical viewpoint. She just dozed off to a perpetual sleep. All her life she was begging the good Lord for a happy and peaceful death, and that was what she prayed for each and every single day. Days after she died, we got to know she still said that prayer for me, which she started praying when I left for the minor seminary many years ago. That yellowed with age copy of the novena to Mary, Help of Christians, that I gave her back in the day was still tucked in with all her daily prayers. And she always prayed for a peaceful and happy death. The good Lord gave what she wanted most. Like Solomon, who begged the Lord for wisdom, my mother was given what she asked for. Now, without the obstacle provided by grief that closed the heart and mind to understanding, everything now falls into place. We would do well to aspire for that same wisdom that Solomon prayed for. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding heart to judge your people and to distinguish right from wrong. For who is able to govern this vast people of yours? There are things that defy our understanding every day. In our selfishness and pride, we do not understand why we need to forgive and live in peace with those who cause us harm. For example, we cannot understand why we need to respect authority, even those and especially those who in our mind do not deserve to be lording it over us. We do not understand why we need to turn the other cheek to those who wish and do us evil. We do not understand why we need to have second thoughts about wishing the deaths of those we consider bad guys. There are so many things we just do not understand. And precisely for this reason, we need to beg the Lord for wisdom. This wisdom will guide us to discern right from wrong. This same wisdom will lead us to accept basically unacceptable things in God's own good time. This is the same wisdom that will find solace and joy in God's commands, despite the initial protestations and questionings that fill our minds and hearts. The psalmist declares today, Lord, I love your commands. For who has integrated the disparate parts and parcels of his life for one who has broadened and deepened with God's help his view and perspective on life and events in the world, for one who has opened himself to the reality of God's loving intervention in his life. The law of God's mouth is more precious than thousands of gold and silver pieces. Indeed, everything works for good for all those who love God. This is the wisdom all of us should pray and beg God for. This wisdom, more than just opening us to accepting difficult events in our lives, will lead us to an even greater vulnerability, the capacity to risk ourselves for a pearl of great price. This wisdom that now acts out of the conviction that all things redound to good for those who love God, will lead us to accept everything God sends in our lives, all sorts of fishes, including those we do not like. People will invariably come into our lives, people we like and people we do not like. There will even be those who will make us suffer. The wisdom that God will give us will make us accept them all as part of the whole package. For some, it may be a sickly child who demands extra attention from parents. For others, it may be a hard-to-please neighbor, a difficult character we have to love and live with. For still others, it may be a partner in life and in love that for years has become a real pain in the neck for a variety of reasons. Sicknesses, relationships turning sour, failed friendships, broken promises and vows, they are all part of the total loving package from a God who makes the sun shine on the good and the bad alike. I started out this reflection with the admission that I and all the rest of us do not understand many things. Indeed, we still don't. For all the catechisms and homilies and religion lessons we have undergone, we still do not understand a whole lot of things. I suggest that it may well be because we really do not know what it means to understand. We postmodern people, learned in so many ways and schooled in the finer nuances of logic and scientific discourses, reduce understanding to a matter of the mind. But in stark contrast to this outlook, the Bible puts understanding as a matter of the heart. The heart stands for the center, the seat of the total person. It is where decisions and choices emanate. It is, for the Bible, the privileged place for wisdom to take root, from which all actions and decisions take their origin. It is no wonder then that Solomon begs the Lord, "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and to distinguish right from wrong." We all need the wisdom we can get from the Lord these days. Why? Because there is a very real temptation for us to fall into despair. There is a very real danger for us to become cynical at the sight of so much graft and corruption, at the sight of so much suffering and pain that millions of us have to face on a daily basis. There are 1,001 reasons to come to grief, to become less trusting, less spontaneous, less warm, tender and loving to our fellow men. I would like to share with you the words of an ancient poet, Rumi, who wrote in the 13th century, "Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. The child weaned from mother's milk now drinks wine and honey mixed. God's joy moves from unmarked box to unmarked box, from cell to cell. As rainwater down into the flower bed, as roses up from the ground. Now it looks like a plate of rice and fish, now a cliff covered with vines, now a horse being saddled. It hides within these till one day it cracks them open. Part of the self leaves the body when we sleep and changes shape. You might say, last night I was a cypress tree, a small bed of tulips, a field of grapevines. Then the phantasm goes away. You're back in the room. I don't want to make anyone fearful. Hear what's behind what I say. Ta-dum-dum, ta-dum, ta-da-dum. There's the light gold of wheat in the sun. And the gold of bread made from the wheat, I have neither. I'm only talking about them as a town in the desert looks up at stars on a clear night. We all need to beg the Lord for this wisdom and understanding. Together with Solomon, we ask the Lord to give us that understanding that would be able to see beyond our little concerns, our pains, our sorrows, our worries, and see God's joy from one unmarked box to another, that gold that shines out in the wheat, in the bread, and other ordinary things in life that we take for granted. We need this wisdom, and we beg you, O Lord, to grant us this understanding heart like Solomon did. And this, my dear friends, is your Kalakbay at Katoto in this rather lengthy reflection today, 17th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Wishing you God bless you all and happy weekend.